Hi, my name is Clouday and today I want to do a video that is actually inspired by another video around YouTube. It's called Would I Repurchase These Palettes? So not necessarily the same concept, but then similar. I don't think that I would be able to answer the questions, would I repurchase a palette if I happen to lose it or very unlikely use it up. But I don't think I would repurchase any palette right now in my collections because most of them, I think more than half of them, are already discontinued, so I wouldn't be able to purchase them in any shape or form. And also, if I ever lose or use up a huge chunk of my collections, eyeshadow collections, I would purchase a new palette, a palette that I've been dreaming about, the palette that I've been wanting to purchase, a palette with a color story that at the moment I'm really interested in right now, like a new breeze of air into my collections. That's what I want to do if that's the case. So that's the reason why I don't feel very committed to the original idea. So the things that I'm going to do a bit differently is that I'm going to answer the questions, had I known everything that I do right now with my current taste of makeup, would I have purchased any of these at all? So I'm going to pull out some palettes in my collections, actually a lot of palettes I'm going to talk about in today's video. Hopefully I can get through all of them in a decent amount of time, knowing that I am only gravitating towards a certain color story or a certain texture. So let's get started with the video. The first one that I am going to talk about is the Natasha Denona Love palette. This is my dream palette from the brand Natasha Denona. I've been wanting to purchase this since it was launched, I think around Valentine's Day 4 years ago, and I did love the color story at that moment. At that particular moment, I was really into these warm burgundy berries tones. This is the palette I'm wearing on my arms right now. To be honest, right now I'm more neutral and cool tone preferred. So today when I pull out this palette, and I've been wanting to play with it because ever since the beginning of this year I haven't touched it at all, and that says something about my preference for this palette, which is not very high right now. I bought it for myself on my birthday 2022. It was still available in Australia at that time, so I feel like it was just precious. And in my ranking of my 2022 palettes, I put it on the second spot because I genuinely loved it at the time. I was more into bolder makeup, very full-blown, very saturated red, purple, burgundy, pink looks. But at the moment, so the look today, I think it's pulled out very warm. I'm trying to use this shade, it's called Soul, and a little bit of this shade is called Dream. These two are the more cool tones shades in this palette, but I don't feel like it. I don't feel like they are cool tone enough for me at the moment. They lean quite warm, and the moment that I kind of layer the shade Transparent on top, I feel like this look is going to be very warm, and I'm not against that. I still kind of like this color story, but yeah, something about warm tones at the moment don't really call to me anymore, so I don't think I would purchase this palette if I had to choose again. It's quite sad, but we have the retro palette from Natasha Denona. We have other more cool tone palettes that I would be more interested in. So actually, hypothetically, if I lose my entire makeup collections, I would go to the store and purchase the retro palette. That's how much I still love it. Like, it's like a sister of this palette, even like more cool tone, more desaturated. So that would be my reference at the moment. Unluckily, this is not my top choice anymore, but I still keep it. I'm gonna keep playing with it because I loved it at one point and I don't hate it at the moment. So right now, just like a random order, I got the Wet n Wild Lights Up palette. I purchased this one not too long ago, I think early this year, around December last year or January this year. This is a very cool tone palette, so it's right at my reference point that I've just explained. So you have this kind of very green, mossy teal, and you have this kind of black, but it has very strong blue navy undertone to it, and then you have an array of gray. And I think the one that took my food to get this palette right away rather than other warm tones or other more neutral palettes from this range is the texture. So if you look at these two shimmers, you can feel like they are the kind of like thick, foil, a bit chunky, a bit texture eyeshadow that would give a very beautiful, scattered, shimmering, glittery effect on your eyes without being an actual chunky glitter particles. So that's what I was inspired at the time, and it was on sale. But having said that, I am only interested to use these two shades, but not the rest of the palette. This palette has 10 shades. It means only 20% of this palette is actually for utilizations for me, and it's not helpful at all if you think about that. So because I feel like I want to do more easy look, maybe like one and done eyeshadow, or like a full matte look, or like one matte, one shimmer, I still very love to have two beautiful shimmers like this in my collections with like a neutral, a bit rosy, a bit murky rose undertone in the two shimmers, but I don't need the entire palette. So I wouldn't purchase this palette just for two shimmer. I would rather go for a single eyeshadow, or like two single eyeshadow, or like a quad that include these two shimmers and maybe this matte. I really like this matte, and probably this brown. So that would be the quad that I would go for the quality rather than the quantity of product I have in here. I'm still glad that I have it because I got it on sale for like $6 Australian. That's such a steal, but not just because it's a steal. So I wouldn't repurchase this palette. And I have these two palettes from Australis. It's an Australian makeup brand. You can find it in Big W or like Priceline. I bought these two palettes in 2022, and this is my favorite palette of that year. I rank this palette quite highly as well, but now looking at it, I wouldn't purchase this, like, because these two were launched at the same time, and it's kind of a visual thing. So they were displayed together in store, and this one caught my attention first with all of these beautiful duochromic, multi-dimensional, foily, flecky texture, beautiful shimmers. Very, very shifty, very, very ethereal. So I was really drawn to this palette. I think I swatched it multiple times in a week just because I thought it was just the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And I would purchase these if I were myself at that moment again. You know what I mean? Like, I would feel like looking at this palette from time to time, I'm still inspired to do a look with it, and that's how much I love it. So I would think of repurchasing this palette if I lost it So this is like an exception. So like I would repurchase this palette if I use it up. Like I don't know. So this is gonna be like my priority to think about it. So that's how much I am into this palette. But this one, I think it's just like a cherry on top because I got one that was not a major issue to get another one. So I would like, okay, let's be a bit experimental with green and like mossy, mucky yellow. So I purchased this one. This is still a beautiful palette. I'm very drawn to the quad, this quad right in here. So the same problem happened. I am only interested in some of the shades in this palette, but not the entire one. So it's not very, very smart to purchase something just to use a portion of it. So that's the epitome of unsustainability. So you feel like if you use a palette for good cause, that is good, that's beneficial, but not. You only use a portion of it and the rest will go to waste. So that's not the way to go. I wouldn't purchase this palette at all with my taste of makeup right now. And to give you guys a little bit of more context about my taste of makeup right now, I have observed my makeup changes throughout the years, throughout like 7 years at this point. And there was a period that I'm more committed to something than the others, and there's a period that I'm more committed to something compared to other periods. So it's kind of a pattern thing, trying to figure what's the pattern within the changing taste in makeup. And my makeup hasn't changed much in the last 2 years. I think that's a tendency. So like based on my history with makeup, with my experience with how my makeup taste changes, looking at my makeup taste right now, I'm doing a forecast the next 1 or 2 years. I think it's a reasonable time frame for makeup taste to change. I don't think there's going to be a huge shift. So my makeup taste right now is, I think I've just done a video talking about the favorite color that I want to put on my face right now. Remember to like put it somewhere. It's a mucky rose. It's a cool tone taupey mauve, a bit desaturated, like not too over the top. So that's my base like at the moment. I don't think it's gonna be hugely shifted in a short period of time, or like if something like very sudden happen, I don't think there's gonna be like a trauma or like an emotional event in my life that would change my makeup philosophy. Yeah, dramatically like that. Like it very unlikely to happen. And sometimes people think that, oh, maybe I should have something as a backup plan, but now I can see that the risk is higher when I purchase something that's not my taste, rather than the risk of not having something in case of things change. I hope I'm making any sense right now. So long story short, I just want to say my makeup taste has been stabilized for the last a year or like a year and a half. So I would give it a certain certainty that, okay, I could still go on with it without feeling like, oh, what if anything changes and I don't have the thing that I want anymore. And that leads to a decisions like this. So this is kind of my color story at the moment. It's a beautiful kind of neutral-ish, a bit muted, rosy burgundy tones. Not quite taupey mauve like I described, but still in the same territory. It's just a bit more berry, a bit more burgundy, a bit reddish in the undertone. I think the packaging is really beautiful. Like it's a kind of like a very sturdy, a bit bulky kind of a plastic packaging. But we have some glitters in this palette, and I didn't know that when I purchased it. I thought they were just like sparkly shimmerings, but they are like fine glitters, and I don't like that about it. And once again, I'm drawn into the mattes in this palette. Once again, the formulation is not that great. It's a Korean eyeshadow palette, so you can already expect the intensity and the quality of the palette to be, which is I think very similar across most Korean beauty brands. They have a very standardized formulation when it comes to eyeshadow. So like if you purchase one palette, I don't want like mostly, but like yeah, maybe mostly get the rest of the palettes that is in the market right now. So this kind of like a very full picture, kind of a very good capture of Korean beauty eyeshadow formulation looks like to me. Would I purchase this palette if I had known everything right now? I would say yes. I think this is just a precious belonging. I think the joy of owning a palette like this palette outweighs the actual utilizations of this palette. So I enjoy the idea of owning a palette like this, just to look at it, just have a couple of beautiful mattes in this palette. These three are beautiful transition shades for that particular purpose. I can use this one as blush, and I don't mind just to use it from time to time. Like, it's not going to be a big issue for me, but I think the aesthetic and the feeling of having this palette is really, really great. And that me talking from a financial view, that I don't struggle a lot with money, if not any at all. Yeah, and it's just weird to say, it's just weird to admit that our choices and the way that we come to the choices are gonna be different if we have different financial situations. So I think I'm very good at controlling the finance aspect of my life, and I know I get a lot of support from my parents. I worked before, so I have some income, some saving money. So I know that with my state of living right now, I can afford these. So I wouldn't mind just have something for the sake of having it like this one. This is not expensive. I think this is like maximum 25 Australian dollars, so I can just work for a few hours and would be able to afford this on top of anything that is already paid off for me. And I know it's not going to be the same for a lot of Australians, for example, because this is where I live right now, so I have a good observations of what's going on. So it's just kind of me rambling about the reasons why I feel like I have a very good control of my spending, and I don't squander my money on makeup. Like, I think I spent $300 on makeup, not including skincare, but 300 Australian dollars for people of my range of income wouldn't be too high at all to spend on makeup in 1 year. And I think I've done a really good job at, okay, this is not a good time to buy it. I don't feel like I really need it, so I don't buy it. I skipped the entire 20% off like beauty sales at Sephora, I think last week, and I don't feel bad at all. I just wasn't in the mood. Like I said, I've been wanting to buy the Veg palette from Natasha Denona, so the mini blush. So you have two blushes and one highlighter, and kind of like fading into each other. I really, really, really want that little thing. That's so cute. But I skip it totally. Didn't even feel regret. Didn't make any impulse purchases at all. So I just want to say that these are my decisions based on the comfort and the kind of very generous access of me to these kind of makeup, because it's not going to be an issue for me. If you go into debt, if you buy them on credit cards, don't even think about it. Like, don't even think that you purchase this or anything. Like, just try to be realistic with yourself. you need to live, you need to survive and live first rather than buying makeup beyond your means. I hope it makes sense. And next we have the Colourpop in a Trance palette. This is a few years ago, would be in the group 5 palette that I would keep if I lose my entire makeup collections, because pastels for a while was my style. At the moment it's not. So I would try to find like a quad including like these 2 shades. It's just like a super shock, so it's like translucent with a lot of blue, purple and pink sparkles. Really interesting. Maybe the shimmers, this kind of like periwinkle blue purple shimmer, really interesting on the eyes. And maybe these 2 mattes. So like I would purchase the entire 9-pan palette. And to be honest, I didn't think that 9-pan palettes were really big, but look at the way that I do my makeup right now. I think 9 is really a lot, and 4 even like more than enough. So I wouldn't purchase this palette. Like, I'm not trying to be ruthless, but I would want to be more conscious with my purchase. So I don't say that I squander my money on makeup, but yes, like a lot of makeup that I have purchased throughout the years, I didn't use them at all. And that could say something about we actually buying more than we need, and maybe it's a time for me to reflect on that. I squander the resources on the makeup that I purchased and thought that I could use. So it's kind of an abstract concept of consumerism, not like spending all the money to things that you don't need, but in a lesser extent. I feel like it could be something that's worth worrying about. I'm not sure if I should worry about my spending right now. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was not very conscious about my financials. So a few years back, BH Cosmetics, before they went kind of chapter 11 bankruptcy, they put out these 2 palettes. This is the Blueberry Muffin. People were obsessed with it. And we have the Passion Paris. A few years ago, they put out these 2 palettes, and at the time, they look like the most beautiful palettes that I've seen in my life. And I stand by the statement. I think in 2020, they were loved. They were really loved, and especially this palette. Yeah, see, you can see the pattern. I was more into like jewel tones, deeper, more saturated pinks, purple, red, a little bit of like bluey purple. So I thought this palette's gonna be the love of my life, and I tried it, and fast forward a few years, I don't think this color story is for me at all. So if I saw this palette right now, knowing that I already had experience or something similar to this, I would purchase it. But maybe, I don't know, maybe if it's like a larger palette, okay, I'm being very hypocritical right now. If it's a larger palette with more neutral, more nuanced colors, in a way that they can be like transition shades and could help me like lighten up a little bit, I could be once again interested in the color story again. But right now with this intensity, yeah, I would stay far away from it. So that's why I still keep it, just in case that I want to mix it with something lighter. If I just want to use like some of the darker shades as like a liner or like a deepening situation. But I think I would purchase this palette. Like, something very interesting about this palette, it has, yeah, technically deeper shades, like some of the deeper shades, but you still have like lighter options. And these shimmers are really beautiful. They are kind of like cool toned, muted, like still right up my alley at the moment. The only thing that I would change about it is to make these blues more purplish blue. Oh yeah, so that's the only thing that I would change about this color story. So like if I what's the word? Contemplate? Yeah, if I ever contemplated to purchase a palette of like a family of color story like this palette, I would want it to be more purple so that I can use more of these like purpley blues shades. Yeah, but I would I would have like a soft moment when I saw this palette at the moment, and I would purchase it. And yeah, I think we only have a few palettes left. So we have the e.l.f. Rose Quarter Bite Side. I was trying to catch up with the trend, so like at the time I think I was still in the university in Vietnam, so like 3 years ago. I thought it was cool to own a palette like this. I still like the color story. These are still my favorite shades to wear, like rose water, you can tell it. And yeah, it's just right up my alley right now. But the formulations is really fragile. So at the time when we can only have, you know, knowledge about the color story rather than the formulations, I don't think there was any store in Vietnam at the time to swatch and to see how the formulation is like for e.l.f. But now when I'm in Australia, I can go to some store and see the display and get the idea about the packaging. Everything comes in the packaging has a tendency to be fragile, like just the way that they are pressed to the pen and how they position these metal pens make the actual powder formulation or cream formulation to be more fragile, more subject to moisture, air, and become pretty nasty. Like, you know, this kind of packaging with a cream blush, and you see all of the fuzzy thing that stick to the surface of the cream layer. That's quite gross. So now I learned that I wouldn't purchase anything in this clunky packaging anymore. And don't get me wrong, this packaging is quite clunky as well, but you can see that the plastic is thicker, so then more protections is added to this kind of configurations. And also like this one, this is not very sturdy, but look at how they were laid out in this kind of frame. Looks more sturdy, looks more nicely put together, indicating the integrity of the formulations is going to be held longer compared to this. I would spend a little bit more to buy the quad with a better, more sturdy, more, what's the right word for it? I wouldn't say expensive, because for drugstore packaging they don't look expensive to me, but more jointed, so the way that they would join together as a component like this would be more structured. So I have Modern Renaissance. This is like a historical moment of the beauty industry, and I bought it way later than I should. Yeah, I couldn't afford it the time that it was really hot, so I waited a few years. In 2021 I purchased it, and it was really late to the game, and it's past the prime time. And if you know like OG beauty YouTuber or like people who are like interested in makeup for a long time, at once, if they had owned this palette, there's already decluttered. So it's something about the fact that this palette didn't stand the test of time at all. And throughout the years, I didn't think this palette has the best color story ever, but like I was so excited the moment that I could purchase it, that okay, it's gonna be like a kind of a sentimental object in my collections, and I wasn't wrong about it. Like, I still enjoy looking at it, but I don't use it the way that I thought I would. Like, some of the tones in the palette would be appropriate for me at that time. Like, so like 3 years ago, like 2-3 years ago, would be more appropriate for me in the past rather than at the moment. So right now I would only touch, I think, 1 or 2 shades in this palette, and that's it. Having said that, I said that I would purchase this palette just for the sentimental reasons, but it doesn't make sense. Like, now I feel like it's a bit ridiculous. It's a bit, you know, like, it's just something that you want to satisfy your inner child. Like 2021, I wanted to satisfy the inner child of me in 2016 that loved the idea that people wearing this palette and becomes the most beautiful woman that I've ever seen in my life. So I was holding into that ideology of owning this palette equaling getting access to being more beautiful, being into the woman that I want to be. So it's kind of like a drug in that way, but overall, like, if it's me, 25 years old, knowing that this color story is not for me, the formula isn't that great at all, to be honest, it's kind of meg. I strongly say that I wouldn't purchase this palette at all. Like, even though right now it's like on sale, maybe it's like $10 or something, I wouldn't think that I purchased this palette. Like, with the description of the formulations, with the color story, with the very, very easy to be dirty, easy to be nasty packaging, no, this palette is a no-go for me. And finally, we have 2 really adorable palettes. It's the collaborations between Etude House and HERSHEY'S. So these are my first introductions, my first impressions to K-beauty eyeshadow. So they are really cute, but they are too light for me. This one is not too light, but if you look at these 3 mattes and the shimmer, they are quite light. So I would see myself to use something like kind of like mid-tone, like this portions right here, this kind of like 7 shade and this matte. So they are kind of like in the middle. I would consider myself to use neutrals within that intensity, and this one is like straight up light. But I really love it. I really love the idea of Hershey chocolate to be in the palette. I love the idea of the palette. So it's a concept thing. I love the concept, but I couldn't think beyond the love for the concept to think about, oh, what's the formulation is gonna look like, how it's gonna be translated to my eyes, the color story, how much of it I can use. I think that's a huge barrier for me when it comes to buying things for the packaging, buying things for the collaborations, buying things for the color story just at the first glance without really having more intuitive reasoning into the actual functions of the palette, not just palette, any makeup item or any object that I own in my clothing. I couldn't think beyond that because I can actually afford it. So it's very hard when you can afford everything easy. It doesn't hurt much, like it's not gonna ruin your life when it comes to like small purchases like this, but overall it's not a good pattern, it's not a good behavior, it's not something that I would want to practice so that it would become a bigger issue and have a bigger impact in my future life. So these 2 palettes are really cute, and I don't wear neutrals. I just don't wear like brown neutral. So I would buy maybe 1. So I would purchase this one, but not this one. I think, yeah, it's only smart to say that I'm still drawn into the palettes like this. It's like very compacted, it's very easy to use for like traveling, if I ever travel at all. So I wouldn't purchase this, but I would purchase this one. Once again, it's for the functionality that I think I could get out of it. I don't know it's gonna be how much, depending on how much makeup that I would actually hold on in my collection. But this one, I don't think it's gonna be a very bad choice. I've used it from time to time. I think I've used it quite a bit, and I like the looks. So yeah, wouldn't purchase this, but purchase this. So that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. It's a long one, and sometimes it's really hard to get into the nitty-gritty details of how I come to the decisions to purchase or not purchasing a palette. I think it's very complex, and I think I'm not making a good job at explaining, especially in English. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Once again, I'm Cloudy, and hopefully we see each other again.